All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, I have a fabulous panel of ladies joining me, and we are going to discuss how to address today's recruiting challenges by learning from your female staffing leaders. So before we get started, I wanted to thank you all for joining us. I know everyone has busy schedules, so we really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to spend with us here. Also, we love questions, so feel free to ask those anytime via the Q&A. We've also set aside time at the end, so if you don't get your questions in there, you can always ask them via the Q&A at the end. And lastly, this recording will be distributed afterwards, so no need to take notes or screenshots. We will be sending this along when we're finished. Let's go ahead and meet today's speaker. So like I said, I have a fabulous panel of female leaders with me. Jamie, if you want to go ahead and get started and introduce yourself, we'll go down the line from there.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name's Jamie Donnelly, and I'm the president of Integrity Staffing Solutions.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Lauren Griffin. I am the Chief Client Engagement Officer with Volt Workforce Solutions. Excited for this discussion today. Have been in the staffing industry since I started right out of college as a recruiter. So super passionate about the opportunity for women in particular in the industry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Lincoln. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Bayada Home Healthcare. As Lauren just said, I'm very excited for this conversation as well, and looking forward to a very interactive and intriguing dialogue with everyone.
All right. Lastly, I'm Nikki Houston. I work with enterprise sales here at Sense. I too am very excited about the conversation and looking forward to all the great content and questions to come at the end. So today is not about Sense, but before we get started, I do want to give everyone a high-level overview of who we are and what we do. Again, this will be very high level. If anyone's interested in learning more or has some questions, my email will be shared at the end. Feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can get you more information as needed. So for those of you that are not familiar, Sense is an automated talent communication and engagement platform. Today, we power the engagement at over 700 staffing firms. We reach every day over 100 million candidates and employees and are used by over 40,000 recruiters. Sense also drives more than 3 million placements every year. Sense has raised over $90 million in capital along our journey from Excel Partners, Google Ventures, as well as SoftBank. Sense has been around for 6 years, and our platform helps source, engage, and retain talent throughout the entire talent lifecycle. So again, if you guys want to learn more about what we do or how we do it, feel free to reach out to me at the end. So today's agenda, we'll discuss how the corporate landscape has changed for women since February of 2020. We'll discuss some of today's biggest recruitment challenges and how they relate, leveraging these experiences to improve recruitment strategies, as well as improving internal retention, and lastly, our Q&A session. So there has been a paradigm shift in staffing. So we're going to discuss that today, as well as the role that women have played. So the paradigm shift has changed recruiting for basically everybody, but it's especially changed for women since February of 2020 and the onset of COVID-19. So why do we need to reevaluate how we're recruiting? Well, the paradigm shift in staffing affected women differently, and it really impacted recruiting, retention, productivity, every aspect of workplace dramatically. So women have left the workplace in mass, as well as top performers. I'm sure nobody here is unaware that there's a shortage of candidates in today's market, but yet the candidate experience still seems to be broken. 61% of candidates report never hearing back from recruiters after submitting their application. 49% of candidates decline an offer because they had such a horrible hiring experience. And 58% of companies report an increase in candidate withdrawal rate. So the impact on employers is especially dramatic when considering women candidates and top performers who are trying to balance it all, trying to return to the workforce, find new, more flexible work, or even advance their careers. They don't have the energy, time, or patience for a poor candidate experience. And quite frankly, they really expect better, especially in this day and age. Ladies on the panel with me, does anybody have anything or thoughts that they'd like to share with regards to this topic?
I mean, I would just say you're spot on. These are areas that we have been laser focused on really trying to improve, starting with this no response rate. I mean, it breaks my heart when you see these stats, and even I believe as an industry, we can do better, and technology is for sure a major component in that for us at Volt. But really that's just to really enable that human touch. We've got to make the connection with these candidates. It's no surprise if they're not hearing back that you're seeing the other two stats contribute to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes for a really poor experience and gets the candidates frustrated where they feel like, hey, maybe I'm not even going to continue to apply. Why bother?
Exactly. Yeah, why bother?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Lauren.
Absolutely.
So,
It also, I was just going to add, it also sets the tone for the entire impact against your employer brand. So all of us know that we not just tell, a couple of people we have access to a tool called social media, but we can go on and tell a whole bunch of people all at the same time about don't even waste your time there. So the urgency of ensuring that we're paying close attention to these factors is just critical. It can kill, it can be brand destroying.
absolutely. It's more important than ever, even a soft letdown, to let somebody know that they've been heard, they've been received, because like you said, you're not just impacting a single candidate with social media. It spreads quickly.
Yeah, sure does.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, ladies. So obviously there's been an undeniable impact, which obviously clearly leads to an opportunity as well. McKinsey data shows double-digit increases in the likelihood or to downshift or leave careers for women in the first year plus after the pandemic. So nearly 2 million women actually left the workforce. Some of the major groups that experience the largest challenges are working mothers, women in senior management, and Black women. But against those setbacks, there's also a lot of lessons to be learned. So many workforces and workers, their policies and cultures just simply weren't in place and weren't ready to handle these changes that were coming and meet those needs. So things like dealing with sick family members or even being sick yourself. I think we all remember the childcare challenges. So the schools being closed, not only were women and parents expected to work their 9-to-5 job, but also be a parent, take care of the children, and become a teacher too, to some aspect, and making sure that the kids are learning and they're getting through their lessons each day. So a lot of challenges and roadblocks force many women and parents to step away or step down from their careers. So the big question is have employers learned what it takes to get these individuals back, which presents a big opportunity. So data shows that more women than ever are returning to work. Employers with strong cultures and processes can provide these individuals the opportunities they need. So those employers who create better experiences and environments are really poised to land that top talent that's looking to return to work. So Jamie, you've been with Integrity Staffing for over 20 years, which gives you a really unique position and perspective. How has Integrity learned from and even changed its policies and or recruitment strategies based on what's happened since COVID?
Yeah, so I don't have to tell anybody about this war for talent. Like, we're all living it right now. What we've learned over the past couple of years is that we absolutely have to meet candidates where they want to be met, right? So in the past, we used to get to be very prescriptive, right? Okay, we want you to come into our office at this time, fill out this 27-page application, then you have to go here for your, screening, and we were the boss applesauce on how the candidate experience went, and it was our experience and it didn't matter, right? It matters now, right? That's the like you said earlier, the entree into your experience as an employee with our organization. So now we give people the freedom to choose, right? We give candidates the freedom to choose how they want to engage with us as an organization and apply with our company. They can use technology, they can engage with us in person, they can do a hybrid of both, right? So we couple technology like bots and video calls and virtual chats, all that great stuff, with our in-person experience in our offices. And by doing that, we give candidates access to our recruitment team whenever it is most convenient for them, right? And that's really especially important for women who are trying to balance that mom life, that family life, and fitting in that application experience. And it allows us to increase the number of quality candidates that we see, and ultimately that we place on assignment.
Great, thank you. Lauren, Volt serves clients across a range of industries, many of which have vastly different experiences for talent, especially women, since the start of the pandemic. How have trends stayed consistent in some of the key verticals that you all serve?
Yeah, so I think the biggest consistency across the key verticals is this onboarding, hiring, placement, right? So there's a war for talent across the board, right? We're going to continue to reinforce that throughout the discussion. We all know that's real. But regardless of the vertical, whether they were scaling or downscaling, all of our clients have really looked at this kind of onboarding to assignment process. I think it really builds off of what Jamie spoke to with in past lives. Many of the clients had detailed and very extensive pre-placement requirements. And across the board, we've really looked at that in partnership with the clients to determine what is still relevant, what is necessary in order for them to achieve their business objectives, and what is maybe just in place because it's always been in place. Now we don't really know why. So I think, and that kind of ties into, in my mind, really that full life cycle experience for the candidates, right? Because we've hired them on to our own company, but then that placement was another hurdle to get through that could be quite lengthy.
Yep. Great. Thank you so much. So let's continue on talking about what are the biggest recruitment challenges facing your organization right now. So the challenges that employers faced pre-pandemic are really just magnified now. Especially everything that workers, and especially women workers and businesses, have gone through in the past 3 years. So now that women have identified what they need to thrive in the workplace, and several employers have actually adjusted and made those changes, women are finding multiple employment options and will withdraw themselves from consideration or even just not apply at all if they even have a minorly poor experience. Things like, this was mentioned earlier, I believe it was you, Jocelyn, things like negative online reviews and word of mouth, especially with social media, can kill your chances at landing top women talent and top talent overall. And many employers are maxed out. Their resources are maxed out. So it makes it even more challenging to have that extra mile gone and spend that extra time getting to know the candidates and providing that exceptional experience, especially for those female candidates that are really expecting that in today's day and age. So Jocelyn, healthcare, particularly home health, is a bit unique in that throughout the pandemic, and really with no signs of stopping now, hiring nurses, caregivers, CNAs, therapists, etc., is not expected to slow down. How would you say, if at all, the challenges facing healthcare and home health have changed since the earliest days of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time. I'm excited to be a part of this industry. The healthcare space, 85% female dominated. So recognizing that going in and, coming out of the pandemic, being part of the pandemic, nurses are leaving the occupation in huge and tremendous numbers, primarily leaving hospitals, facing burnout, facing a multitude of issues, just feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, etc. And so as we start to think about the demands of how that has started to look for home health care, specifically, what we're trying to drive is a sense around purpose and the ability for individuals to fall back in love with what it is, why they chose the profession in the first place. And if you think about what was happening in health systems and hospital systems during the early days of pandemic, no one really knew anything about a bunch of things. And overwhelmed pressure on emergency rooms and overwhelmed pressure on essential workers and our first responders. And so being able to communicate and articulate a value proposition around, you don't have to leave the profession to fall back in love with why you chose to be in this industry, and perhaps home health care being more one-to-one type of scenario for you, being intimate with young children, aging parents, whatever may be the situation, can provide an opportunity for you to get back to your sense of purpose. And I think one of the things that we saw coming out of the pandemic, we talked about this, was really women a lot of times being much more introspective around, am I doing what I'm meant to do? Am I making the impact that I want to make? And taking some time to really think through those things. So being able to make sure that we're aligning with that sense of purpose and driving community and impact is really a core focus for us.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, Jamie, let's talk about internal recruitment. This has been challenging as well for many staffing firms since the earliest days of the pandemic. Has the pandemic, employment trends, the economy, et cetera, had any major impact on the internal recruiting and retention? And has Integrity changed their approach or policies towards internal employees since the earliest days of the pandemic?
You're muted.
I told you guys once a week I stay on mute on every conference call. It's gonna happen. What I will say is that we realized the same thing with internal candidates that we realized with our temporary associates, right? You have to meet people where they are, right? As it relates to just, internal candidates or internal employees, like working remotely, we did that wherever we could, wherever we could identify support roles that were able to continue to work remotely. We did that. And as those roles have grown or changed, or people have evolved into different roles or left the organization, we've backfilled with internal candidates or external candidates who continue to work remotely. And that has really helped cast a wider net. And then there are so many people who do want to be client and candidate facing, like in person. And so when we're recruiting, really identifying those people who are excited about that opportunity, because not everybody likes to work from home. And that takes a different kind of recruitment effort there. We also learned the timing, right? The timing of our process had to change. No, gone are the days of, panel interviews, 3 people on a panel, 5 panels. You can take 4 weeks to get a candidate through the process. It's impossible now. We can't do it. So we try to keep it to 3 interviews or less. We're really tight in our communications with our candidates, and that helps them understand where they stand at all times. And we use technology to help us with that. If you're not using technology, right, you're really missing the boat on that. And our hiring managers know it's really important to sell our opportunities, because candidates are interviewing us. This is absolutely a two-way street. And then in terms of, keeping people working and engaged, we've increased our training and development programs tenfold across the organization, providing people with more opportunities for coaching and learning and development. We've added on additional benefits, additional holidays, additional paid time off. You have to right now. It's crucial. The war for talent it's unlike anything I've seen in the 25 years I've been in the recruiting industry.
Yeah, it's definitely quite unique, and being flexible, I think, is really important. That's a great point. Some candidates like to work remote, and some don't, and it's great to hear that you guys are accommodating both.
Yep.
Great. Well, Lauren, from women leaving the workforce, temporary or not, to the great resignation and quiet quitting, the media has no shortage of buzzwords or catchphrases to get employers and talent riled up. But what are you seeing out there? What's the sentiment among not just women, but top performers across all the verticals that you serve? And is there a distrust for employees or an openness for new opportunities that you're seeing now?
Well, first off, I would say you're right. That buzzword, it is
Mm.
everywhere. I felt like 3 months ago, none of us had heard that term, and now you can't go 10 minutes without reading an article about quiet quitting. And a lot of it is a result of just kind of the fatigue and the self-reflection that Jocelyn just talked about, where individuals are really looking and wondering where they are. So I would say broadly, I have not seen that it's a broad disengagement of individuals, right? I think it's more a little bit of deciding and determining what is their passion, right? To make sure that they are connected with that, and they're looking introspectively. And as employers, we then really need to say, what are we going to do to make sure that we have the talent that we want to, that we're creating that culture, an environment that's important to the type of candidate we want to attract and retain. To Jamie's point, things like, unlimited PTO is something that we implemented, I think, in 2019, and that has served us well, not just as a retention, but it was a great attraction tool for many candidates. I think that whether you want to call it employee engagement, quiet quitting, it's going to be a topic that is going to continue for the next several years, I would say.
I agree, Lauren. Just building on that. I do believe that there is a generational aspect to this conversation that we have to introduce as well. So I'm not going to disclose my age. I will just say I'm very seasoned. And, when I was entering the workforce, the mindset and mantra was, you work all the hours, you put in your time, you pay your dues, you do, and you give, and you don't ask for a whole bunch, and you show up and do extra, and and good things will happen. And that was the exchange, that was the expectation. So my daughter is 22 years old. She just graduated from University of Michigan. She's starting her first job, and she is a very hard worker. And just the other day, we were having a conversation. She's a research associate. And she said to me, she's like, yes, I don't check my emails after 5 p.m. And I said, oh, really? And she said, no, I don't. And I said, well, what if, and she's like, no, I work from this time to this time, and then I go do these. And she is emphatic about that. Like, it is. So this idea that, you're just going to keep giving and doing all these extra things, like generationally, it's a totally different mindset around what their expectation of the exchange is. The exchange is, I work from this time to this time, and then I go live my life, but I'm not checking my emails after 5 o'clock. And I kind of clutched pearls, what's happening? But there is a generational mindset, in addition to gender, I think, that's in place as well.
I would agree. And I
I
think
agree.
as employers, we have to really reframe what a top performer is, because it is no longer just the willingness to work 60 hours or whatever that number is a week. It's the contribution and the productivity, because you're right, they are not going to, it's not going to happen.
You have to, again, meet employees where they want to be met, right? And only then will you become the employer of choice.
Yeah, I think too, Jocelyn, to your point, I mean, it is definitely generational, but through COVID, when people were working from home and there wasn't really that boundary of the office versus home, people started realizing, they are working a lot of after hours, and your computer's always there and your phone's always there. So I feel like several people that I know at least have tried to really create that separation, not just generationally. I think that's a little bit different, but I think through COVID, people are also trying to manage a work-life balance that seems fair too.
Yeah, there was a little bit of pent up, especially when so many of us were in our houses for so long, really working constantly. It was a little bit of pent up.
Yeah. And multiple people working from the same house.
From the same house, exactly.
Yeah, for
A new
sure.
office building, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, let's talk about how your organizations are using what you've learned to improve recruitment strategies. So really creating a better candidate experience for everybody, including women, is the right formula to better recruit top performers and maximize resources. So Better communication. So thinking about automating tedious and mundane tasks that your recruiters are bogged down with. So how can you take some of that off of their plate to really keep them focused on building relationships with candidates, learning more about the candidates and what they bring to the table, as well as, I think you ladies covered it earlier, presenting the opportunities and the benefits, not only with your own companies, but as external employees for each of those positions. So how can you leverage communication better to actually create more human interaction, even though we're talking about automation? Using things like AI, so to screen candidates and answer questions immediately. So really helping candidates through the whole hiring process when they want to go through the process. So you think about working moms, you think about healthcare, you think about shift workers, or really anybody. They don't necessarily want to talk to somebody during a 9 to 5 capacity. Maybe they're working their job, or they're doing other things like parenting. So how can you better accommodate them and work with them when they want to work with you? So leveraging technology to pre-screen them and put them through the process, whether it's midnight, whether it is midday, or in the evening, to really give them a great experience. And then lastly, creating that better communication and experience beyond just your external candidates, but thinking about consultants and redeploying those external candidates as well as your internal candidates. So making sure they're having better communication and a better experience with the company. So Lauren, looking at internal workers, particularly and the opportunity there, can you speak to how technology has helped Bolt bridge the gender gap and help women advance within the organization with Bolt as well as your external clients?
So I will tell you that in preparation for this, I actually had a Zoom call with some of the women leaders at Volt to get their feedback as well, because I thought it was a good opportunity. And one of the things that came out was so obvious to me was exactly that, the ability to have quick communication on camera where you're interacting with people nationally and having discussions that might not have happened before. So it really has become such a way of life that we're leveraging, but it has allowed, in particular, I think, multi-layers of individuals. So it could be a situation, there were multiple people from California on this call with me. I live in Massachusetts. Typically, I might not have seen them unless I happen to be traveling into that market, maybe once or twice a year, or perhaps never. And instead, we are able to engage on camera, really have a great discussion, and that can give women, and really all genders, more exposure to senior leadership, to what's going on with the company, is that video camera interaction. So I thought that was so simple yet so obvious, because it's become such a part of our day-to-day business.
Yeah.
So I would say that was one area. The other thing is that you mentioned this earlier, is that we did really put a very keen focus on these repetitive tasks and trying to get them off of, in particular, the recruiter's desk, but everyone's desk, between a combination of technology that we're utilizing, also offshoring some functions that just we felt like we could, so that the job that is the most client facing, candidate facing, is really what our colleagues are doing the most of, spending the most of their time on, which I believe is actually going to also then parlay into people having more opportunities, because the areas that you're going to get promoted is when you're solving problems for a client, making things more efficiently, driving those relationships that are revenue generating, and really rewarding. So I think that that's going to have a lot of downstream impact as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about relationships.
Lauren, if I could just piggyback on that, I think you make such a key point there. Sometimes we can easily say technology is going to replace our humans, right? Our people. And in some cases it does, right? But what it does replace is the hands work. It replaces the busy work, right? And it frees up our people, our employees, to do the head and the heart work, right? And that is the most important work. That's the most satisfying work. And when you can utilize and leverage technology to take away the hands work and really let them focus on the things that fulfill them and give them satisfaction, they have a sense of accomplishment, it's so significant, and it helps you, of course, retain your talent, your very precious talent.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
So Jocelyn, healthcare workers are uniquely positioned to require insights from recruiters and employers on what we consider off times,
Mhm.
and really around their schedules. How has Bayada effectively leveraged technology to provide an exceptional candidate experience while hitting core recruitment metrics, particularly things like time to hire, which have become so critical since COVID?
Yeah, there's two pieces that I think about this in terms of. The first is transparency up front within the process. So one of the things that has become an expectation is letting individuals know where they are in the process. And so when you think about a basic consumer experience, if we order anything online, if we're transacting any business, generally we're going to get updates on what exact your order has been processed, it's shipping, here's a tracking number, it's on its way. I mean, Amazon right now is giving you, like, letting you know when a package is 5 minutes away from your house. We in our space need to ensure that we're giving that same level of transparency to the talent and to the candidate audience. And so to that end, being able to use technology that lets people know, where they are they at the interviewing phase? Have they progressed to the next phase? What they can expect, and starting to lay that out and give people an understanding of time. That's how you start to diminish that whole time to hire. And in the healthcare space, you're dealing with people that have multiple offers going on at any time. So a lot of what's being talked about is this whole ghosting phenomenon as well, because recruiters are working with someone, they haven't necessarily captured everything that's going, like, what's it going to take to get to you to a yes, and help me understand what else you have going on, and making sure that we're using technology to nurture that relationship. And again, show some visibility and transparency into where individuals are, so that we're shortening that time to hire and getting speed to start. The second dimension starts to happen around, okay, now you are engaging with us, and how can we give you more control over your opportunities? And then that allows you to get into things like self-scheduling, using technology to be able to display these types of opportunities are available. You can start to have some choice, and, oh, I want to go here versus here, I'm available this date, and really putting more of that control, I would say, in the hands of the end user versus them having to seek out or work with someone else. So almost creating a one-to-one type of relationship. And again, putting the healthcare talent in control of the process.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think sometimes people are a little hesitant to adopt technology, especially when it's regarding relationships, right? But when you think about your point to Amazon, I ordered a pizza the other day. I knew exactly what stage of the process my pizza was in up until the minute it got to my door. I think that's just the expectation that people have now. As a consumer, we're getting that everywhere we look. But in the recruitment space, it's really important to understand where you stand and how the process is moving, especially with everyone having so many options these days.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Thank
that
you.
self-scheduling point, one of the things that we found when we were, after we adopted the ability for the candidates to self-schedule, was the number of people that were scheduling on Sunday nights for interviews really surprised us.
Yeah.
And we shifted a little bit because Monday became, was very busy, but that continues to be one of the busiest times.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So Jamie, how would you say Integrity is using technology to bridge the gender gap and prioritize talent enablement to provide a better candidate experience for really all genders?
So technology absolutely helps to mitigate bias in the hiring process, right? In the screening process and the hiring process. When you can take the human out of it and utilize technology, it absolutely helps. So we've done things like implement bots on the front end of our process to ask consistent screening questions across all candidates, right? So that helps to remove any bias, unconscious bias that might happen if you were having a verbal conversation conversation, and it equals out the playing field. And then also we've utilized technology to actually automatically match our candidates, like qualified candidates with the right positions. So if you can take the human out of this to some degree, for some roles, you can't do it for all roles, but if you can take the human out of that and say, okay, the computer says all of these skills match all of these requirements. This is your best person. Go make the offer to this person, right? Or the computer makes the offer to that person and the candidate accepts it via the technology. You've taken the chance for bias to come into the hiring decision out of play. Now, I will say that this comes with a caveat that everyone has equal access to technology, which we know as a society is not true. And it is an absolute hurdle that we have to overcome to make sure that we are giving equal access to technology. But it's a step in the right direction. And when you couple technology like this with good training and development of your recruiters and your staff, then you can really help to eliminate the bias that can happen in the recruiting process.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So let's move on and talk about influences that you all have had in your careers and your personal growth. So sometimes I think it's really valuable to take a step back and think about what's made the biggest impact on us as women leaders here in staffing and who or what has helped us along the way. So I think it's a great time to learn a little bit more about what's influenced our panelists as they've grown in their companies and their careers. So Jamie, I'll start with you. I mentioned earlier that you've been with Integrity for over 20 years. So clearly they're doing something right. Can you speak to the importance of leadership and what Integrity does better or maybe just differently than other organizations to have given you the support and opportunities you've needed to ascend in your career and remain with the company after all this time?
Yes, it's I get asked this question a lot, right? I know I'm a little bit of an anomaly being with the same organization for it'll be 23 years in
Oh, wow.
just a few weeks. And it comes down to one very important thing is that from day one, 23 years ago, it was made perfectly clear to me that the company was going to work as hard for me as I did for the company. So the organization consistently and continuously invests in my training, my development, the technology I use, ensuring I have access to peer groups and leadership groups, coaching and mentoring inside and outside the company, inside the industry and outside the industry. Investing in me as an employee, I feel like my organization works so hard for me to make sure that I have everything I need to be so successful. And it goes both ways. It makes me very vested and loyal to the organization, makes me work really hard. So that's absolutely from day one, the thing that has set our organization apart.
Great. That's wonderful. Jocelyn, who has been a mentor or strong leader that has influenced you and helped you as you've grown and moved into new roles throughout your career?
Yeah, I really feel like I've been tremendously blessed throughout my career. Like Jamie, I spent 23 years with Kelly and only recently, 5 months ago, made a change and left Kelly and joined an organization, Bayada Home Health, as the chief marketing officer. And what I will say is throughout my career, I've had really strong mentors that have been able to partner with me, coach and develop, invest time. One in particular, her name is Teresa Carroll. I met her when I was first joining the organization, and over the years just developed a relationship, a coaching relationship, watched her ascend and grow her career. And she was someone that, completely opposite in terms of skill set from me. I was always advertising marketing. She was an engineering major. So our brains thought and operated and still do in completely different ways. And so being able to learn how to develop a strong sense of business acumen, also analytical capability was just super, super helpful for me coming in, but also just the coaching on how to navigate organizations and how to make sure that the unspoken rules, you even know that they exist, because every organization has a culture, there are behavioral norms, there are all these things, and no one really tells you. And so being able to have mentors over the years that are able to invest that way in you. Peter Quigley, who is the CEO of Kelly, I count him as a mentor. The chief marketing officer at Kelly, Pete Boland, count him as a mentor. And I also have to talk about sponsorship, because mentorship and sponsorship are very different. Your mentor is someone that you can go to and they're going to help you develop, but your sponsorship is going to speak on your behalf when you're not in the room. So when those opportunities come up where it's, you know what, we're looking for someone to lead this project and we really need someone that's capable of this, this, and this, a sponsor is going to lead with your name. And I would just encourage everyone to make sure that they develop a strong, I like to call it board of directors, of really strong mentors, coaches, but also make sure that you have sponsors that are going to speak on your behalf and make sure that when opportunities are being presented, that you're part of that conversation, even when you're not in the room.
Yeah, really, really great advice and great points there, Jocelyn. Thank you. Lauren, on to you. So the notion of imposter syndrome is a common one and seems almost universally among female business leaders. Why do you think that is? And how can women better support each other to overcome those feelings regardless of their title?
So it is a topic that comes up frequently. I think that some of the things is that it can really start early in your career, right? To the discussion around mentors and opportunity, right? I think that if you can align yourself, right? So like Jocelyn, I was fortunate. I've worked directly for three, I would say, of the most powerhouse women in the industry, Laurie Hawk, Joyce Russell, and Linda Pernot. And one thing I can tell you is that different styles for all of them, learned so much from each of them, but they all were very passionate about that sponsorship and giving other women in particular opportunity. So I think that if you start with your organization and not just your most senior people, but you're giving people an opportunity, whether it's a key project, that can build their confidence. And in some instances, early in their career, they may not be, or even later in their career, not be comfortable raising their hand, and you got to raise it for them. Get them on that project, and that will build the confidence. It might be something that they were hesitating doing, but that's where you learn the most, when you're stretching yourself, when you're a little bit fearless about either taking that other job that isn't maybe a promotion, maybe it's a linear role, but you've learned something different. I know that I did that, and I think that success breeds confidence, and that can help in the imposter syndrome, because everybody deserves it at the table, regardless of gender. You know, your voice is relevant.
Yeah, building on that, I once saw a study that said when a position listing is being written and a woman is looking at it,
Yes.
she will read the list and say, "Oh my gosh, it's 10 things. I only have 9, and I'm not qualified. I can't do it." And they said men will look at the list and it's 10 things, and they're like, "I have 2 of those. I'm good to go. Let's do it."
Yeah.
And I think it's part of maybe it's just part of our upbringing, our DNA, and how we're even wired to always think we have to have it perfected before we go do the thing, versus you have the capability, the ability, you can do it. And I've been hearing a lot of people talk about do it afraid, and take the risk and jump in. And I think the more that we can make sure that we're pushing other women and encouraging them, like, you have this, it's a transferable skill. It's like, yeah, but I don't have this. It's fine. You'll learn it. You can do it. I think that that's where we start to make sure that we are overcoming that idea of imposter syndrome, because I think I have to have it all together before I go do the thing.
Yeah, that's really great advice, Jocelyn. Thank you. All right, so we've packed a lot of information here into a very short period of time. Let's close things out by looking ahead to what staffing firms, employers, plus women and other top performers should keep in mind. So Jocelyn, I will start with you. With healthcare workers facing more burnout than anything in 2022, something many women in the workforce in particular can understand, how is the staffing industry uniquely poised to address the needs of these healthcare workers while also best serving their clients?
Yeah, I think the big piece here is to tie it back to sense of purpose and what is going to drive fulfillment in roles. So when you think about burnout overall, it's not just usually volume of work, but it's, do I feel like I'm in an organization where I'm thriving, I'm able to contribute in a meaningful way, I'm heard, I'm seen, and you feel that. So for me, when I start to think about how do we overcome that feeling of burnout, the counterpart to it is, how do you infuse joy back into the work that you're doing and bring a sense of vitality and energy back into it? And usually that's tied to ensuring that individuals have a really strong sense of purpose, and they understand the vision and the role that they're playing. And caregiving is probably one of the most important roles that any of us will probably ever play in our lives. So the role of caregivers and clinicians being so tied to purpose, but also appreciation for the work that's being done as well, I think is critical. I would also say when we think about war for talent, we're also fighting a war for attention, mind share, and relevancy. And so making sure that we're really clear on that, because everyone's so distracted and there's so many things coming at everyone all the time. So that we're in that war for attention and relevancy. Like, how are you going to provide value to me at this space and station in my life?
Yeah, great advice, Jocelyn. Thank you. Lauren, what's the best piece of advice you can give to employers today who want to provide the best environment to both recruit and advance women within their workforce?
So I think two things: flexibility, right? We heard it. We're going to where the candidate, whether it's our contingent workers that we're placing, our internal, we've got to be flexible. That was the consistently across the board when I had my call with my Volt teammates, regardless of gender, was this idea of flexibility. And it's funny, just yesterday, my nephew has 3 small children and they started school yesterday. And he was telling me how his wife took the first 2 because they had to start at one time. And he went into work early and worked a few hours. And then he left work to take their youngest to kindergarten and she went in. And that just, it really stuck home with me about the flexibility that is why this is so important, right? Because they're juggling a lot of things, and that's just indicative of what the rest of the country is experiencing. So I think flexibility and listening. Listen to your workers. They're going to tell you what you need to hear. There's lots of ways to do it with your ears, with technology,
Mhm.
but listen and really hear what they're saying.
Yeah, great advice. Jamie, what is the easiest thing you think companies can do right now to better attract and retain women and other strong performers within their organizations?
Well, I'll say there's definitely no like magic wand or silver bullet. And it's not easy, right? It's absolutely not easy. It goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier, is that you have to meet employees where they want to be met, right? It's no longer you come to us on our terms, right? We have to come to employees on their terms in a lot of cases, the majority of cases. You have to work as hard for them as you expect them to work for your organization. Because if you're not investing in your employees, regardless of their gender, right, then they're not investing back into the organization, right? They're just not. It's a paycheck. And you have to inspire followership, right? So it's not about just managing your employees day to day. It's about creating meaningful work that inspires them to come in every day and contribute. And it just goes so much further than that weekly paycheck when you can do that. So again, I wish I had an easy answer, but there is no easy answer on this one. It takes hard work, and it pays off in spades. It really does.
Yeah. Well, thank you, ladies. That's all really great advice. Thank you for participating in the panel with us. That's the end of our presentation. We'll move on to the Q&A session. So, Mary, if you want to go ahead and share the questions that have been asked, we'll go from there.
Absolutely. And I've been sitting here just enjoying this content and really enjoying the conversation and collecting some great questions for the audience. So to kick things off, Jamie, we actually had a question come in about the phrase meet candidates where they want to be met. You mentioned that a couple of times, and this audience member would love to know, how do you know where those candidates want to be met so that you can indeed meet them there?
Oh, they're not shy. They're not shy. I don't know if you've been recruiting lately, but they are not shy about it. So it's about giving candidates options, right? Choices on how they want to engage with you. So it's not just about, you have to come into my office and you have to complete this application and you have to meet with an interview, do an interview between 1 and 1:30. It's about saying, you can apply online, you can fill out all of your information online, you could meet virtually with a recruiter, you could do it over the phone, you could do it over video, you can come to my office. I can do it at midnight, I can do it at 7 a.m. right? And it's giving people options on how they want to engage with you as an organization. And once you provide those options, you'll see people start to choose. I mean, it's the same way for their employment path. You know, we have paths where people can, work very hands-on with a recruiter to decide the path that they want to take to go to work, or they can get qualified through a recruiter and then choose their own adventure, so to say, by using the technology to say, I'm going to go work at this client on this day, this client on that day, and just pick up this shift here. And then they don't interact with the recruiter at all. So it's about those options, and people will utilize them, and you'll be able to see where people want to be met for most parts in your organization.
Absolutely. Lauren, Jocelyn, any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
I love it.
Beautifully.
I love what Jamie said, like, people aren't shy. And if they are shy, you just ask them, like, what matters most to you? What's most important? What's going to get you to a yes? And what environment will you thrive? In what environment will it cause you to just opt out? So making sure if they're not volunteering, that you arm yourself, you equip yourself with the right questions to ask.
Absolutely. So the next question from the audience are, what tips do you have for women that are managing other women to help ensure that they are creating a healthy, comfortable environment and atmosphere for the women within their organization?
The first tip, I think, is just making sure that you're taking the time to get to know at an individual level, because while we're all women, we're also all very different. So what's important to me as the mother now of a grown young woman is going to be very different than what's important to a woman that maybe doesn't have children, or even a young mother that has a young baby at home, and they're just coming back from maternity leave and they're really struggling. So I think we can't assume that there's a one size fits all type of approach to leading or managing people, and it requires us to get to know at an individual level what's most important. I know one of the things that I shared once during the pandemic is that in my time of leading people, I probably witnessed more people crying than I ever had in my whole career. And what it was is just the sense of just how overwhelmed people were, particularly mothers, and struggling with the idea of having to homeschool and getting stacks of papers that were this thick, and all of a sudden being told the lesson plan now belongs to you. That was completely overwhelming, and really just was just so detrimental to some of our team members' mental health. And I think what I learned during that time was really just to take the time to listen and be empathetic, and understand what's happening at an individual level, because you really never know. And so we definitely don't want to assume.
I would build on.
Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
We're both like, yes. I would build on and say, as you develop that trust with the individual, giving them clear feedback that can help them either get more comfortable with themselves, advance their career, get more work-life balance, whatever is important to them. If you give the feedback that's very direct and honest, once you've built a relationship on trust, that can really have a huge impact.
Great.
It sounds like listening is a very common thread here. Take the time to listen to where candidates want to be met, listen to what candidates need, what your employees need. So I think that's a great thing that keeps coming up in the conversation. Another question came in from the audience, which is, with so much use of technology, how do you ensure cultural fit? How are you making sure that the technology is taking that hands work, as I think Jamie put it, but that we're still making sure that candidates are a good cultural fit, and how do we use that with technology?
So I can jump in on that. There's a ton of technology you can use. And there are companies out there doing it where they take the people out of the process altogether, the recruiters out of the process altogether, and they match, solely with technology. Our organization has decided that we're not going to do just that, right? We do insert a person into that process to ensure that someone is a good cultural fit for our organization. And you do that by still using technology, right? So it's not requiring someone to come into your office for that interview. It's either doing it, in person if that's the way they want to do it, on the phone if that's the way they want to do it, or over a video chat if that's the way they want to do it, right? So you have to offer multiple methods to get that in-person fit check, right? That fit check before you then allow the technology to take it from there. It's our opinion that it's just not the best use to take it all out altogether.
I would agree. And I think that being very clear on what the rule is, what the responsibility and the expectations are up front, and being really clear about what your culture is so that you can communicate that throughout the process very consistently and clearly, in particular if you're in some instances not engaging in person initially or limited time, right?
Yeah, and I would add, even to your point, Lauren and Jamie, making sure that you're demonstrating what that culture is throughout that process, like being the embodiment of the culture. So that in itself will allow you to both identify, like, this is what this is what this feels like, and here's how it ties back to our overall mission, purpose, and values. And here's how we bring that to life. And then you can use technology to also get to scenario sorting and all those types of assessments that can be done to help substantiate that as well.
Absolutely. Well, as we near the top of the hour, I just wanted to take some time to say thank you again. I know we had a couple of additional questions that came in through the chat, so I want to open it up to say, the panelists have been kind enough to provide their LinkedIn profile. So if you do have a question that didn't get answered, please absolutely feel free to reach out to them for some of that mentorship that they discussed today. And then Nikki as well has provided her email. So if you have any questions about Sense, please absolutely reach out to Nikki. Otherwise, just again, want to take the time to say thank you for everyone for joining us, and thank you to our wonderful panelists for their openness and willingness to have this conversation with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you
thank
for
you.
having us.